Welcome back, everyone, to the eCoreAcademy e-learning platform today. My name is AJay back with yet another anatomy and physiology video for you all. And today's lesson topic is all about the excretory system. It's going to be an overall overview of the system. It's a new system in our anatomy and physiology course. But before we get into the meat of what this system is and how exactly we're going to be breaking apart this lesson, please make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit that like button on this video, turn on post notifications, and please utilize that comment section down below if you have any feedback, questions, comments, or even suggestions for future videos that you all would find enticing or like to view in the future as our fellow viewers. So, of course, this wouldn't even be possible without your support. So, of course, we will adhere to everything that you are saying. And we do appreciate the overall feedback, the constructive feedback on how we can move forward in a more productive manner and help you guys out overall as the learners. So as I was saying, today's topic is about the excretory system. Now, as I have done system overviews in the past, and Anita has done system overviews in the past in anatomy and physiology, the actual courses, we've given you topics going over how exactly we're going to split apart these different systems, and how exactly we're going to be conveying this information to you into bite-sized chunks that all go together, essentially. But today I'm going to be skipping over that part just to get you guys thinking and actually get into depth with the actual teaching material. And in my next video, I will be introducing my first lesson. And within that lesson, just as I did with my muscular system overview, I will be utilizing the second video within that system to actually convey to you the sequences of lessons that we will be going over in the excretory system and any systems alike, just so that you guys don't get confused and caught up with future lessons that go ahead. But I just want to give you guys a basic fundamental overview, and then we can start getting into specifics once we build those foundations. The excretory system in general is a fairly short system to go across. However, there are many intricacies that I do want to cover with you and go into advanced clarification. Of course, I will start off videos starting from rather general to more specific topics as we go along. But overall, these overview systems, they probably give you the overall summary of the system themselves. So I'm going over the excretory system in whole, and then we will take it into bite-sized chunks in our future lessons. So with that being said, let's take a look at what the theme of our lesson is for today. So the theme is, what is exactly the excretory system and what are its important structures and functions? Just like any other given system, you need to focus on the anatomy and physiology of the system within the human body. So we have the excretory system and its important structures. Those are the anatomical structures. Those are like your organs, your vesicles, your transport systems, different minor systems within the excretory system. Those are going to be your anatomical structures, your separate organs or your separate structures within the actual body and part of the system. And then, of course, their functions are going to serve for the physiological roles. So how exactly do they correlate with each other, and how do they cohesively conquer the end goal of the excretory system overall, and how do they conquer and tackle excretion within the body? All right, so enough of that. Let's start getting into the basis of the excretory system. Let's start going through some terms that I will help you memorize. Rather than memorizing, actually, I would like you guys to learn it. I hate using that word memorize. I know many teachers are saying you have to memorize. Sometimes there aren't ways to learn it. Well, memorizing is completely different. We want you guys to learn and understand exactly what you're learning. So let's forget about the memorization and let's actually learn. Bring some interest into it, and it's actually a lot easier to do it that way. Rather than memorizing terms, let's learn them. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video. Let's give you guys a quick recap on overall with anatomy and physiology. So in anatomy and physiology, we have these separate systems, and overall, they have one main purpose, and that's one function. So the entire system is united to develop one main function, and those separate parts of each given system has certain roles within achieving that given function. So all about the system, the excretory system overview. So before we get into the specifics of the excretory system, we need to identify some basic language roots of the excretory system. So what does the excretory system mean? Some of you might be puzzled but it's actually fairly simple. It's all derived from one fairly simple concept, that main function of excretion. So excretion is a constant removal of metabolic wastes within a given organism. And once these materials have already been utilized, that's exactly when these items are excreted. So it's the constant removal of the items that are consumed into the body. They're utilized within the body. Say, for example, if you're consuming food and certain proteins, those proteins would be broken apart. Those amino acids within the proteins would go straight to the muscles of the body and help fuel the body itself and its muscles in order to complete a task. And once the body has already utilized those certain consumption items, it will get rid of it through excretion, because obviously we cannot hold all the waste that we have. Now, one common misconception about the excretory system is that it includes both urination and obviously the solid waste that we dump out, number two to be specific. However, excretory system does not get involved with the number two, which is essentially carbon. That's more towards the digestive system, which we will also talk about in later videos. This is much more specific. These metabolic wastes include carbon dioxide. Of course, that's the gaseous form of these wastes. Then you have salt, water, urea, and uric acid, which of course are your given fluid wastes, and also fluid byproducts that are also developed in this process. So we have these certain chemicals and fluids such as urea and uric acid that actually help break down things like your common acids, amino acids, your common proteins, carbohydrates, all those complex carbs and proteins, and macromolecules overall. It helps break those processes down and helps break those items down, and essentially they also get excreted. So we have these functional items and these byproducts that are developed within this whole process that actually get excreted and get rid of from the body, essentially. That's what excretion is, getting rid of. And these waste products most commonly exit the body as forms of perspiration, which is just you sweating, essentially. That's your form of sweat. And then urine. When you're urinating, you're also getting rid of, you're also utilizing a form of excretion in that process. So another cool fact about the excretory system that many people do misconceptualize as well, and that's what we're here for. We're trying to break through all of those barriers of misconceptualization. And when we're looking at the excretory system, there are certain laws within it. We have to get rid of a certain waste product once we consume it. So it's not just consuming fluids and getting rid of them through your urinary system and perspiration, but it's also about inhaling gaseous forms of waste, getting rid of gaseous forms of waste. So when you're inhaling, you're also exhaling. And when you're exhaling, you're technically excreting waste. The item carbon dioxide, just to give you guys a bit of a spoiler, is a waste in the body. It's developing as a byproduct, and we need to get rid of it immediately. It's a waste inside of the body, and excretion helps us get rid of it. So therefore, I included the lungs. And then, of course, we have the more common conceptualization of the excretory system, which includes the kidneys and things like the bladder, the ureter, urethra, and then, of course, it exits through near the genitalia. It's exactly where you get rid of urine, essentially, where you're urinating. That whole process, and I will go into depth with that as well as also as we progress through this system. We're going to get into specific sections that I will divide up for you guys in the next video to come. Moving on. So what's the overall importance of excretion? So the body must get rid of certain waste materials of certain quantities because they're constant intake and consumption in order to survive. So when we're constantly consuming food and fluids, we need to also keep in mind that although our body is utilizing it, we're not utilizing every single bit of it when we're moving. There are certain byproducts in these consumption materials, which it just has to be, that's just the way it is. It's a give and take relationship. So once you consume something, you utilize whatever's good inside of it, and then you have waste products, those byproducts developed in that process that must exit the body. And if it remains within the body, it could potentially cause severe infection. And without our excretory system, none of us would be alive here today. Just saying that those toxins probably would have overtaken, diluted your body. You would have become super bloated, and just an ugly picture overall. I don't need to paint that for you. But yes, it would be ugly without our excretory system. So most organisms have a process called your digestive system, in which food and nutrients are broken down. Well, digestive system, it only applies to specific animals, but then of course you have plants, bacteria, fungi, protists, that utilize different forms. And that'll be covered in the biology course that Anita is doing right now. She will complete that for our biology course, and you can go check out all of the different basic types of cells and different animal kingdoms and different kingdoms of living organisms in her biology videos. But just to give you a recap, the digestive system is the process in which you're consuming food. Then the nutrients are broken down into basic macromolecules that are used for the body's functions and for bodily usage. And obviously, and obviously, those things are going to be excreted, all of those byproducts that we don't need. And it's important in maintaining homeostasis, which of course is your pH levels, your acidity of your body, and getting rid of toxic byproducts such as ammonia. And ammonia is a common byproduct formed, especially when you're consuming certain acidic level fluids and also bases, because ammonia it's not an acid; it's actually a base, a very strong base that can essentially cause some toxic harm to the body, and we need to get rid of it in that process. And as you can see here, something that I wanted to include was homeostasis. I'm pretty sure all of you have heard it. Homeostasis is balance overall, and homeostasis within the body and anatomy and physiology is balance within the body. That can do with fluids, with give and take processes, like the muscle contractions and extensions, all those things. But homeostasis was a term built long ago, and it was referenced by Leonardo da Vinci when he actually made his famous man painting, and he utilizes painting to describe the essence of man. Now, one of the common terms taken from this is actually homeostasis. And as I was saying, just to recap what this picture really represents and what homeostasis really is balance, but specifically in terms of the excretory system, it has to do with a two-way process that is always existence in order to survive. It's that important. So you first have consumption, and then you have usage, which is just common usage that you use, and then that goes to excretion. It's a give and take process. However, this is not necessarily a constant cycle. A cycle would be a repeating process in which your end result would directly correlate with your beginning result. However, excretion, you're not going to reconsume your excretants. That would lead to serious problems. You wouldn't want to put that back in your body. So this is better coined just as a system overall. All right, let's move on. Let's take a look at some of the important organs, shall we? So the excretory organs. Like I said, introduce you in the first slide, we have the lungs, which are responsible for the removal of carbon dioxide from the body. They excrete carbon dioxide, and this is after oxygen is inhaled. So right here, I'm just showing you that give and take process. You're consuming oxygen through gaseous form and releasing carbon dioxide also through gaseous form. Then we have the kidneys. They house urea and uric acid, and these are very important components right here. Just gonna highlight that. Urea and uric acid, they're intercorrelated how exactly they work, and I will explain that in future videos for the excretory system. And they break down macromolecules like proteins after nutrient consumption. So once you consume everything, they have nutrition level. Anything other than water has nutrition levels, and they will be coined under macromolecules such as carbs, proteins, amino acids, and lipids like fats. And essentially, urea and uric acid, they break it down within the kidneys themselves. That's that last final breakdown in order to disperse any of the nutrients that are left within those within a given matter back into the body, and essentially accumulate the waste and get rid of it through urination or perspiration. Then we have the skin, which many people do not realize is actually an organ overall, and it is also part of the excretory system. So that's 2 for 1. The skin is an organ in the body, the largest organ in the body, and it removes salts, water, and urea from the body through perspiration itself. And this is something that happens in correlation with the body's needs as well. So when you're exercising, when you need to cool yourself down, when you get nervous, you're just essentially getting rid of those waste products. That's why it's always good. That's why always doctors always, pediatricians, they always recommend that you get at least 1 hour of exercise, because exercise is good for you. Cardio is also good for you, especially because it helps you get rid of those waste through perspiration, get rid of excess waste. And it helps you stay hydrated, actually, because then you're forced to drink more water, which is very good for your body. But don't drown yourself. That's a different topic for a different time. Anita's also covering that in her biology course. And then finally, we have the urinary system, which is a complementing system. This is technically a subsystem of the excretory system that purely specializes in urination. And it helps in filtering water from blood and fluid within the body and transferring it into urine and excreting it. And just to give you a summary of the skin. Now, I know we went over the integumentary system. So how exactly does perspiration really work? So recap right here from the integumentary system. So what happens is, if we were to draw the skin, just take let's take a look at this as if this were a small skin display on the outside, very, very outside of your skin, the epidermis. If you look through it, you're going to see small little holes and these little cracks with it, and those are called your pores right here. And what those pores actually are, they're just openings within the skin itself. This allows for the skin to breathe, but it also allows for them to excrete. So this is where sweat releases. And once sweat is actually released, these pores will actually close up. So they will close up once enough sweat is released and you start to get super dehydrated. Remember, it's taking water also outside of your body, away from your body. So it's going to dehydrate you as well. So you need to drink lots of water when you're sweating. So they will close up so that that fluid does not re-enter the skin. And that's why when you're sweating, always, always, always try and wipe that sweat off, unless, of course, you have some sort of reaction to it. When you rub sweat across your skin, but try not to rub it into your skin. Try and rub it, wipe it off, or just leave it as is, and then wash it off. So yeah, just some life tips. So now let's take a look at respiration as a separate entity. Now, inhaling and exhaling, specifically, I like to call it a separate part of the excretory system, where you're utilizing gaseous form, and this is inhaling and exhaling through the lungs. So inhaling air, you're going to inhale air, which is mostly nitrogen and oxygen. That's a cool fact as well. Most of air is actually nitrogen, and only a small percent, I believe it's 28%, is oxygen. However, we do need nitrogen, but we specifically need oxygen, and we harvest that for our bodies. That's a necessity to us. And it's utilized to transfer, so you're going to inhale air, obviously, and it's going to transfer into the blood and distribute throughout the body. Obviously, the blood is responsible for carrying oxygen. Those red blood cells, they carry oxygen throughout the body, and the body essentially needs it to produce energy for itself and live, essentially. So we have this inhalation of oxygen, O2. That's just your abbreviation, O with the subscript of 2. And then we're going to split that off. Now, what happens in between this process of excretion, of consumption to excretion? We have the lungs, which are the mainly responsible in the respiratory system, subsystem as well. The lungs are responsible for CO2 and O2 separation. So the lungs will essentially harvest the O2, disperse it throughout the body, filter the air as well, and then it'll also gather CO2, which is that toxic waste. It's not necessarily toxic. It's just waste overall, that gaseous waste, and it will separate it from the O2 and become ready for exhalation, meaning when you exhale it, you're just getting rid of that CO2. Just a little spoiler for the next step. So, of course, your lungs are harvesting that O2 and separating it from the CO2 once it's developing it. And CO2 is merely a byproduct of this process. And then, of course, you have CO2, and it's getting released from the body, exhaled from the body, and you're exhaling it to release the built up carbon dioxide and get rid of it as a byproduct of inhalation. So it's a two-way step process. You always have to get rid of what you're consuming in a different form. It's always being altered through excretion. Nothing is going to be the same. You wouldn't want to get rid of something that's rich in nutrients as is. You want to harvest it first, then get rid of its byproducts that are produced in the process and just the waste products from it in general. And another cool fact, whenever you see carbon within the body, and you're asked which is it being consumed or is it most likely being excreted, like separately, carbon is oftentimes you're going to be your excretion. So, like, I don't want to say this, but when you're going number 2, that's really just pure carbon nearly. That's very, very pure carbon. It's nearly pure. And then, of course, when you're exhaling, you have carbon dioxide, partially carbon. So all of those things correlate with each other. Carbon is most commonly found as an excreted material. So moving on. Now let's take a look at fluid processing. So this is the excretion of fluid waste. We went away from the gaseous form. Now we're on to the other half of the excretory system. So consuming fluids, so you're going to initially start by consuming fluids and allowing for the body to process the fluids through the standard digestive system, also entering through the kidneys, which is also part of the digestive system. And essentially, what's happening is you're consuming these fluids, and these fluids are being harvested by the body in general. So it could be like a couple of slices of watermelon. You're utilizing that sugary glucose, the glucose within that sugary watermelon juice that you're consuming, and then maybe even a nice cup of orange juice, or just half of an orange, or a whole orange in general. You're consuming that, and that's entering, going down your esophagus to your mouth, going into the body, into the stomach, and being harvested from there. And then what's going to happen is it's going to enter throughout the later phases of the digestive system, and in the middle of the excretory system, it's going to enter your kidneys. And the kidneys use urea and uric acid to further break down the fluids and return any essentials back into the body. Now, it's important to identify that the stomach, everything goes through the stomach in its processes when you're consuming it. So the stomach is going to break down most of what's going on, most of the nutrients. Now, the kidneys responsibility is to utilize urea and uric acid to further break down the fluids and return it back into the body by releasing it through its renal caps, which I will get into, don't worry. So essentially, they're receiving the fluid, and they're giving back what needs to be released and separating it from the waste, just like the lungs in gaseous form. Then finally, of course, as you can see, the excretion process deliberately happens now. So you're going to utilize that uric acid and urea, and they're going to be excreted from the body through urine and perspiration from the bladder and the skin. So the bladder, you're going to release it through your bladder, and it's going to go through exactly, you know, the area in which each gender releases their urine, the urinate, and of course that's why I have the toilet there. So you release into the toilet. And then, of course, you have another fluid, which is perspiration through the sweat, and that is the other way of excretion. Obviously, urine is more reliable, it's much more consistent, but you do need sweat for many other reasons as well. All right. Now let's take a look at the urinary system, a very important subsystem. However, it does have a lot of specifics within itself. So let's take a look at the subsystem of the excretory system, the urinary system. So the urinary system gets rid of the fluid toxins developed in the body and nitrogenous waste, which is developed during metabolism, actually, when your thyroid stimulates the body to increase your metabolism, or just carry out metabolic processes when you're utilizing burning calories. It's actually nitrogenous wastes derived from nitrogen are actually developed in that process. Common waste, and I'll get into that as well, what exactly these waste products are. It maintains the pH of the blood by getting rid of excess chemicals. So that's also involved in homeostasis. It can keep enough chemicals. So when you're releasing, when you're perspirating, essentially, and you drink more water, it'll dilute the what exactly is going out in your sweat, so that you're not releasing too much of certain chemicals and nutrients within the body. But it also gets rid of enough when you have an excess of them. It helps with BP, or blood pressure, and your overall water concentration, which is tonicity. That has to do with osmosis, how much salt is within your body, and it also helps you drain of that. That's why whenever you like sweat, like say for example you're running and you get a lot of sweat pouring down your face, and it actually lands up in your mouth, ends up in your mouth. Sorry. When it ends up in your mouth, it tastes quite salty. That's because you're most likely getting rid of a lot of salts within your sweat. And the primary organ involved in this urinary system excretion is actually your bladder. So let's write that down here. And the bladder itself is actually very cool, and a lot of diseases actually happen here. So you should take care of your bladder. Obviously, you can't take care of it directly, but you can control exactly what's going through your body, and try not to hold in when you're trying to go to the bathroom for too long. That's why when you're going on a long road trip, try not to drink too much water before you go, because the bladder itself needs to be heard, and you need to adhere to your bladder. Otherwise, it's going to be rude back to you. So the bladder is really cool. It has some functions like the sphincter muscle. And the sphincter muscle helps with voluntary and involuntary release. So you can choose when to release it. That's your control. But there's another release method in which the bladder itself controls when urine is released into those reservoirs where you can choose to release it. And then we'll take a look at sweat. So excretion through sweat, the other process opposite to the urine, not opposite, but the other subsiding excretion method. So sweat gets rid of salts and nitrogenous byproducts similar to urine and before maturing into pure toxic waste. So when you think of sweat, it's not as disgusting. I mean, technically it is fairly disgusting because you are getting rid of excretory products, but it's not as disgusting as urine. It's not like you're literally excreting pee. It's not like that. So it's before it matures into pure toxic waste. So that's because it has a lot of water concentration, a lot of salt concentration, more nutrient packed and less toxic, pure toxic waste. And it's oftentimes excreted through a salty water. Cool. Perspiration occurs when these droplets of fluid seep out of the pores and onto the skin, where they will eventually evaporate after cooling down the body. So, like I was saying, the skin actually waits until the skin dries up when the sweat is actually evaporated from the body, or drips off, or washed off, so that it doesn't re-enter the body. That's very important as well. And then the apocrine glands, which you guys might recall, maybe, hopefully, from the integumentary system. If you did watch that, if you haven't, please go check that system out as well. But the apocrine glands, of course, at eCoreAcademy, the apocrine glands are responsible for the secretion of sweat, and they're referenced in my previous videos. And these glands stimulate that secretion. They control how much is being secreted. And then, of course, it's responsible for cooling down the body. And then it excretes 3 different products. So one of those products being salt. Then you have nitrogenous bases. We'll just call them waste, nitrogenous waste. And then also toxins. Toxins developed as byproducts, such as like ammonia. Ammonia is more commonly excreted through sweat, but it's also excreting toxins once that urea and uric acid break it down. All right, now let's just take a quick look at a diagram overview. So these are some of the major organs of the excretory system, as you can see here. So right here, we have the kidneys, which are actually one of my favorite organs within the body. They're so complex, and the cool thing is you only need one to actually survive. We're given 2, we've been blessed with 2 when we were born, but you only need 1 to survive. Then, of course, we have the ureter. It's actually THER, ureter, right here. The ureter actually transfers the fluid within the kidney into the bladder itself. Then we have the bladder, as shown. And then finally, we have what we call the urethra. And this is where the urine is actually being released directly outside into the outside world, wherever that might be, hopefully into a toilet. But yeah, certain situations call for certain conditions. And then, these little fuzzy things on the top, they're just called renal caps. But don't be afraid about these more specific anatomical structures. I will go into depth. And then, of course, we have the lungs. So this is your right side, right lung. And then, of course, your left lung. And then within, you have, of course, your esophagus. That's splitting the 2. Will I be able to fit this here? Yes, I will. So that's the esophagus. And the esophagus is actually what's your windpipe, what's going into the body, fluids or air, and then that's transferred directly into the lungs when it comes to gaseous form. Of course, your lungs are actually filled up with fluid, but they're not fluid's not entering the lungs itself. Like when you're drinking a cup of water, it's not directly entering the lungs. So it is built up with fluid, and it has a bunch of venules and veins going through to actually filter out the air, separate that whole process. and constantly keep you inhaling and exhaling. So it has to do with correct correlation, your cardiovascular system, and having good cardio. That means you have good lung capacity, good lung filtration. You're able to inhale and exhale efficiently, and also with your lung, how many your resting heart rate. If it's very low, that means you're very fit. Certain standards like that can actually help you measure your daily life and your lifestyle. All right, everyone. So that'll be it for today's video. Thank you guys for sticking around. If you have already to the end of this video, please make sure to like and subscribe down below. Utilize the comment section, as I said at the beginning of the video. It's very useful for both of us on both ends, and we do really appreciate your comments and feedback. Please make sure to turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on any of our channel's latest uploads as well. Check out our website at www.ecoreacademy.org. See what kind of we have see the full unlocked access to what we as an e-learning platform actually offer. We have note sheets, quizzes, and worksheets that go along with each and every single one of our videos, curated specifically to you, our learners. And then, of course, feel free to email us at eCoreAcademy@gmail.com if you have any questions or if you just want to reach out. And check out our socials. Full links are in the description box below at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. See what kind of interesting and new content we have there. And also check out our TikTok account there as well, where we're going to add completely new topics to you guys. And it's not going to be academic, essentially. It's just going to be some fun, really fun skits for you guys to see, just to brighten up your day, essentially. Aside from academics, just something fun that we wanted to develop for you guys, and really base ourselves as the eCoreAcademy community with you guys, learners, and our new teachers that are going to be showing their faces on the platform. So once again, everyone, thank you guys for watching. I had a blast making this video. This has been AJ, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.